Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. My name is Robin Harding. I'm the Tokyo Bureau Chief for the Financial Times. And it's my pleasure to moderate today the launch of the Asian Economic Outlook update. That's right, I think, Sawada-san, from the Asian Development Bank. It's a crowded market these days in global and regional economic outlooks. But I think the ADB's Asian Economic Outlook is particularly valuable for the insight it gives into some of the world's most important economies, particularly in China, and also the wider developing Asian region, which I think gives it something that the publications from the IMF and the World Bank don't necessarily have. And here to present the update, we have Mr. Sawada, who is a veteran of these things, originally for a long time a professor of economics at the University of Tokyo. He joined the ADB in 1997, and did you join as chief economist?
Yes.
Or as chief economist, and has been in that role ever since. So I will hand it over now to Sawada-san to talk about the outlook, and then we will move to Q&A. So Sawada-san, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin, for nice introduction. Good morning, everyone. I'm Yasuyuki Sawada. My nickname is Yasu. I'm Chief Economist of Asian Development Bank. Today, I'd like to make presentation about Asian Development Outlook update. Asian Development Outlook, in short, ADO update 2019. This is the ADB's flagship publication. In April this year, we published ADO. And then this time, after 6 months or so, we would like to share with you update of our findings. My presentation will be composed of two parts. First, I'm going to talk about short-term, 2-year horizon growth forecast and inflation forecast for Asian developing economies. 46 members of ADB in developing Asian Pacific region. We all together. First part, I'd like to talk about growth forecast and inflation forecast. Second part, I'm going to devote time to talk about medium-term or long-term issue. This time, we pick urbanization and cities in Asia, and I'd like to share with you these two things today within 20 to 25 minutes. So let me start by summarizing our key messages. Number one, overall developing Asian growth moderating this year and next year, 5.4% this year and 5.5% next year. The two largest economies in this region, China and India, show the same trend, growth moderation. Inflation rates slightly picking up because of the food price increase. However, this year and next year, inflation rate is 2.7%, and that's well below last 10-year average of inflation rate 3.2%. So inflation expectation seems to be under control. Having said this, there are downside risks looming up in this region. U.S.-China trade tension is source of a potential risk, and also overall downturn of developed economies. That's also another source of risk. Finally, domestic debt, especially private debts, are building up in developing Asian economies. That's also a source of potential risk. And finally, as to the second part, medium-term and long-term impact of urbanization, we reaffirm growth and job creation. Cities and urbanization play a key role. But in order to continue seamless and sustainable urbanization growth, transport sector and housing sector, also urban planning, these are the critical elements. Government should remove binding constraint of this element. So these are the 5 key messages. Now let's closely look at the growth performance. As I mentioned, this year's growth rate forecast is 5.4% or 5.5%. That's a slightly downward revised. Dotted line shows the our April forecast. So we downward revised this year, next year growth rate. There are 3 elements behind this downward revision. Number 1, slowing a global growth rate. So now we have been watching developed countries or developing region, United States, Euro area, and Japan. Group of 3 countries or G3 economies we are watching. And the overall consolidated growth rate downward revised from 1.9% to 1.7%. And behind this, especially Euro area and the US growth slowdown, elements behind this overall developed economy or G3 economies growth slowdown. Secondly, re-escalation of US-China protracted trade conflict or re-escalation of conflict. That's another element. And thirdly, global electronic cycles, especially semiconductor production cycle tilted downward in last 1 year or so. So that's an element behind this overall Asian growth downward revision. Having said this, domestic investment is also weakening in major Asian economies. Here we listed last year and this year's actual major 11 Asian economies growth rate decomposed by element, domestic element and demand element. Blue part in this chart showing investment contribution to growth last year and this year in each country. We see, if we compare last 2 years, including this year, we see blue part contribution is shrinking. Actually, 7 out of 11 economies showing here, 8 out of 11 economies showing here, we see contribution of investment slowing down. On the other hand, orange part showing domestic consumption contribution to growth rate. That remain rather stable. So actually, strictly speaking, 7 out of 11 economies here, orange consumption contribution to growth remain stable or slightly increased. So another element of growth slowdown of Asian economy is downward tilted contribution of investment, while consumption contribution to growth seems to remain stable. Now let me talk about sub-regional growth performance this year and next year. Top left is East Asia, and down left is Southeast Asia. Both regions, sub-region, East Asian region and Southeast Asian region, as we can see downside red arrow, April forecast we downward revised. Because these sub-regions, most economies are relatively open to the trade, and also industrial structure, they have a higher proportion of high-end electronics and the semiconductor industry. So because of this global electronics and semiconductor cycle tilted downside, and also headwinds in global trade, these 2 sub-regions overall encounter slowing down of economic growth. Top right is South Asia. South Asia also, we downward revised economic growth, mainly because the largest economy in this sub-region, South Asia sub-region, India, growth slowing down. And this slowing down of growth in India is mainly driven by broad-based domestic consumption, investment, and industry slowing down. Central Asia Pacific region, the rest 2 sub-regions, we upward revised growth forecast. As to the Central Asia, the largest economy in this sub-region, Kazakhstan, growth rate has been quite strong because of the domestic investment is quite lively, especially public investment is leading factor pushing up largest economy in this sub-region, Kazakhstan's growth acceleration. Pacific region, also we upward revised growth rate, mainly because largest economy in this sub-region, Papua New Guinea, showing a stronger growth than our prior expectation. PNG was hit by big earthquake last year, and the main industry, one of the main industry, natural gas sector production and export seriously affected last year. So it's now process of rehabilitation, reconstruction of natural gas sector. We see this speed of reconstruction and rebounding is much stronger than our prior expectations. So that's why we upward revised PNG growth rate, and as a result of our Pacific sub-region's growth, we upward revised. So now turning to price. Inflation, as I mentioned, overall inflation is slightly upward trend, and this year, next year, 2.7%. But and the reason behind this upward trend is a food price increase, mainly African swine fever affecting meat market, and especially Chinese meat market prices encounter upward pressure of price increase. So reflecting that, overall inflation rate we set 2.7% this year, next year. However, as I mentioned briefly, this is well below last 10-year average, 3.2%. So inflation expectation, inflation in general, seems to be well under control and well anchored. So now let me talk about the potential source of risk. And the major source of risk is escalation of trade tension between US and China. So this figure shows the chronology of two countries' trade tension and the trade measures escalation. So right now we have a latest information as of September 1st here. September 1st. So up figures shows the U.S. measures imposed on Chinese export to the U.S. market, or U.S. import from Chinese market. That's a blue part. And the size of blue circle shows the amount of export from China to the U.S. or U.S. import from China. Amount of trade being exported to U.S. trade measure, tariff measure. And darkness of this color shows the level of tariff measure. So right now, as of September 1st, 374 billion Chinese export to the U.S. market being exposed to tariff measure as high as 16% to 25%. So that's the current scenario. And Chinese government has been retaliating this tariff measure. China side, 117 or 118 billion export to China from the U.S. or Chinese export, Chinese import from the U.S. That level of trade, Chinese authority impose tariff measures. Again, 16% to 25%. So that's the current status quo. And on the table already put escalation scenario, all the bilateral trade between U.S. and China, actually bilateral trade in goods being exposed to 30% tariff measures. So that's the maximum escalation scenario. And also U.S. put on the table additional measure, regardless of origin of export. All the auto and the auto parts imported in U.S. market, U.S. already revealed government will impose tariff measures. So that's the escalation scenario. Bilateral full tariff measures plus auto and auto parts, regardless of origin. So this escalation started roughly 1 year ago. Strictly speaking, beginning of last year, but escalation started roughly 1 year ago. And we already seen some response in the market and transaction, cross-border transaction. So Chinese trade naturally slowing down. So this is a U.S. import from China, or Chinese export to the U.S. market, 12% decline. And mostly 12% decline in Chinese export to U.S., concentrated on electronics and machinery products, And orange part is the textile garment products. So light industry products also affected. On the other hand, excluding China, developing Asia, 10% increase in export to US market. Okay, so we see a trade shifting from Chinese export, now facing tariff measures and slowing down. That part replaced by other Asian economy overall. Vietnam, we see quite salient increase, 33% export increase by Vietnam. And more than half of this increase in Vietnam export to the US market concentrated in electronics and machinery products. Other countries like Bangladesh, number 2 global exporter of garment industry, garment products, also expanded export to the US market, and a 13% increase of Bangladesh export to the US. That is almost fully accounted by garment apparel products. So this trade shifting is relatively good news for other Asian economy, but actually overall impact is multifaceted. So Chinese product encounter tariff measures, so export slowing down, production slowing down. Naturally, suppliers connected to this Chinese export products also negatively affected. Suppliers located in China or cross-border through a global value chain. So actually, direct and indirect impact can be negative for industries and producers in around Asia. But at the same time, we see this rather positive channel through trade redirection. So overall impact is not necessarily clear. So we used our unique data set, which can capture industry input-output relationship closely, which is called the input-output table, multi-regional input-output table. And this ADB's unique data, we quantify overall what's the likely impact on Asian economy. So we set the 2 scenario, current scenario, as I explained, current level as of September 1st. That's the first scenario. Second scenario is a worst case scenario where all the bilateral goods traded between US-China encounter 30% tariff measure plus auto parts measures imposed by US government. So these 2 scenarios, under 2 scenario, we quantify what's the likely impact. First, current scenario, Chinese economy GDP will slow down. Over 2-3 years in total, cumulative 0.6% decline of GDP. So that's under current scenario. Okay. But on the other hand, other Asian economy largely gain overall. Although, strictly speaking, according to our estimate, magnitude is almost 0. But our data shows direct, indirect negative impact plus a positive trade reduction effect overall. That's slightly positive. Okay. So this pattern found in our data, under worst case scenario, qualitatively we found the same trend. So this figure shows the under escalation scenario, what's the likely impact on Chinese GDP. Over 2-3 years in total, 1.2 or 1.3 percentage point decline in GDP. So that's the likely impact on China. And other Asian economy, we see a positive impact, especially Vietnam. Over 2-3 years, GDP will go up by 2.3%. Okay, so single year, probably 1% GDP pushing up or 0.8% GDP pushing up. And that impact seems to be explained by green part, electronics and machinery industry, as well as textile garments and lighter industry. Okay? Malaysia, Thailand seems to gain with a much lower magnitude. So this is because of dominant trade redirection effect. Chinese export replaced by other Asian countries and economies export. So this is our analysis, but this analysis we didn't really incorporate impact of uncertainty. naturally policy uncertainty around the policy trade measures. Daily, almost daily, we see up and down of trade policy. Discussion, dialogue, and negotiation. So this uncertainty itself will generate a negative impact, especially on the investment, because the private sector, seeing this uncertainty, they will naturally take a wait-and-see position. So there could be other negative channels. And also, each country may respond by adopting some expansionary stimulative policy measures, both the monetary and fiscal policy measures. So these policy response we didn't really incorporate it. Other source of risks, in addition to U.S.-China trade measures, we identify overall deeper malaise in advanced economies, especially Eurozone area, as well as Chinese economic slowing down. And domestic side, rising private debts is one trend we found. Corporate sector in China and household sector in Korea, Thailand, and Malaysia, debt to GDP ratio has been increasing. So I think this is another potential risk to the economy. So now let me turn to theme chapter, second part, focusing on longer horizon issues. So first part, I talked about basically this year, next year, 2-year horizons or 3-year impact of trade tension. But now I'd like to pick one of the medium-term and long-term issue, which is urbanization. And how urbanization in Asia, how to make more inclusive to the people in terms of job market and employment. So a little bit of data. In last 5 decades, speed of urbanization is fastest in developing Asian region. On average, 3.4% increase in urban population in last half century, and this is much faster than other emerging economies and also developed economies. And within Asia, especially East Asia and Southeast Asia, shows the slightly faster speed of urbanization. As a result, overall Asian urban population increased from 0.4 billion in 1970 to 1.8 billion in year 2017. So over almost five decades, urban population roughly increased by 5 times. Okay. And this expansion of urban population will continue at a slower pace in Asia. So this is a big picture. Urbanization is a mega trend we have been observing in Asia, developing Asia. So what's the pattern we can find from this rapid urbanization? Usually, in order to grasp urbanization, people use public data, public source. And public source is based on administrative border, city border, and the urban sector border. But the actual urbanization will proceed regardless of administrative border. So we need to capture a real picture of urbanization. So we decided to utilize a satellite image during the nighttime. So nighttime satellite, globe looks dark, but the urban area shows the some lights. So existence of lights and also level of luminosity, we can identify cities from the satellite systematically. So, and also we combine this satellite-based, nightlight-based identification of cities. We combine ground level population, grid level population data so that we can really quantify location and size of cities around the Asia. And we identify 1,459 natural cities, what we call natural cities. So natural city is the cities identify nightlights together with ground level population. And so right images shows the some examples. Top 2 chart shows the 1992 Cebu city in Philippines, and that Cebu city cluster expand regardless of administrative border. We can see slightly administrative border. So, but city expand regardless of administrative border around the coastal line. And the middle is Kolkata. Again, Kolkata city expanded significantly between 92 up to 2016, 17, 18, regardless of administrative border. And down two chart is before Shanghai area, Greater Shanghai area, and now Shanghai. So we see 1992, there are spotty urban clusters and city clusters now merged together, expanded a lot and merged together to form a mega city cluster. So actually, this is an overall trend. Before, we had a spotty small urban and city clusters we found in Asia. Now, each city became so big and merged together to form a much bigger city clusters. And actually, from our data, there are clusters, many clusters, which has more than 10 million people right now, latest data. And we identified 28 city clusters we found around the globe, around the developing Asia region. And also, we are sitting in Tokyo, and Tokyo is a part of a big Pacific Belt city cluster connecting Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, up to Fukuoka. But according to our data, our city cluster looks like this, and we are sitting here. Okay? So this is a trend we found. So urbanization has been proceeding, but actually the way urbanization proceeds is started from a spotty each city cluster, expanded a lot and merged together to form a big city cluster. So now, what is happening inside the city, okay, or city cluster? Actually, city cluster in Asia showing a big benefit of concentration and forming a city and higher population density. This benefit of concentration is called agglomeration economies in economics. And we found quite strong agglomeration economies created in cities and city clusters around developing Asia. So left chart shows the wage rate. So same type of worker, same age, same education level, same gender, same occupation. What's the income or wage for these workers having? We found bigger city, almost exactly the same person living in a bigger city, then wage is significantly higher. Here we show urban wage premium. If we compare with the same person living in a rural area, if this same person living in urban area, what's the wage premium these people can obtain? We see a positive wage premium, and especially this wage premium, blue shows the much higher. So if we are living in big cities, rather than a smaller city in orange, wage premium is much higher. So this is one gain person get involved in this big urbanization trend. Okay? So same type of person living in a big city, wage rate is systematically higher. Smaller city, wage rate is lower. And if you are living in urban, rural area, wage rate is much lower. So that's a trend. So gain in terms of wage, payment and income. Right chart shows the firms' engagement in innovation, process innovation, product innovation, and engagement in active research and development. Actually, again, we see a systematic difference between firms located in big cities, blue, versus firms located in smaller cities. Okay. So this chart and other data analysis shows the very strong agglomeration economies, benefit of concentration. Having said this, there are also bottlenecks and binding constraints. Congestion is a big issue. So I'm from Metro Manila. Metro Manila traffic jam is really horrible. And in order to systematically capture and compare this congestion, we use Google Map data, off-peak time travel versus peak time travel versus off-peak time travel, we compare. And multiple routes within the same cities, we compare. And then we made a congestion index. So red is average congestion index we constructed within developing Asian cities. We can see Metro Manila, Dhaka, these big cities, center of this big city cluster shows the very high congestion level. So I think this is one binding constraint. The other one is for the workers to live in a decent house, affordability of housing. We can capture affordability by comparing housing price to annual income. Usually this housing price to annual income is around 4 years of income. That's the level, average level of housing price in developed economy. Developing economies, emerging economy in general, this ratio distributed around 5 to 6. But the Asian cities, regardless big city, medium or small city, these numbers exceed well above 10. So this shows the how inaffordability of housing is a binding constraint to materialize lively cities' potential economic benefit. So let me wrap up. What's the policy implication? So removing these bottlenecks are quite important. So like Japan, setting up a multimodal public transport system. Today I walked from my home in Tokyo, I walked to Chiyoda Line, 10 minutes walk, and then Chiyoda Line, Yoyohara Station to Nijubashimaya Station, only 20 minutes. So 30 minutes and plus I can come here, and quite predictable when I can arrive. I'm supposed to come 10 o'clock in this morning, so I can really set what time I should change my clothes, brush the teeth, and have a breakfast, and heading to station. So this very effective and efficient multimodal public transport system is really the key. And this is a room we can fill in, the gap we can fill in developing Asia. And also affordable housing, public intervention to make housing more affordable. That's another important policy agenda. And in order to materialize these two things, of course, land regulation, land planning should be carefully set. Having said this, because natural megatrend of urbanization proceeding, and lots of more and more people coming to the small cities, and at the same time cities expanding, but density is naturally increasing, lots of pressure on urban infrastructure, I think it's very important for the government to set sustainable and climate resilient infrastructure so that the urban environment can be really well sustained. Another issue is urban system. So these are city-specific issue, providing a better commuting infrastructure and transport infrastructure and housing. Now a bigger city merged together to form an urban cluster. So I think across cities and across cluster, we need a very close coordination. And so intercity connectivity should be enhanced by providing proper infrastructure, transport infrastructure, and also in order to make this, spatial planning and economic planning should be really coordinated across the local government and local administrative unit. So these are the main messages from our thematic chapter. So let me wrap up again. Main messages, 5 key messages of our Asian Development Outlook Update 2019. So first, overall developing Asia growth rate has been slowing down. Especially two largest economies, China and India, growth rate is slowing down. However, inflation rate slightly pick up to 2.7%, but still this is well under control. Behind, there are 3 main sources of risks. Number 1 is protracted U.S.-China trade tension. Secondly, overall slowdown trend of global economy. And thirdly, domestic debt issue. These are the potential risk elements. And medium term, urbanization should be really sustainable and inclusive. In order to do this, transport, housing, urban planning, these are the policy areas government should closely looking and intervene. With that, I'd like to stop here. Thank you very much.
Great. So with that, we'll move to questions. I'd like to move directly to taking your questions from the floor. If you could raise your hands and come forward to the microphones. And when you come forward, if you could please give your name, affiliation, and ask just one question, please. Gentleman on the table there, please.
Thank you. My name is Richard Susilo from Indonesia. I'm a little bit confused about
your affiliation to
from Tribun News Kompas newspaper in Indonesia. So a little bit confused about the graph. I don't know. There is no page in here. The graph is this one, and will continue if the trade conflict persists or escalates. Yes, this one. So on this graph, the GDP of ASEAN countries is upward. Vietnam is very good, 2.31. But the end of your presentation, the key message, developing Asia growth forecast revised down. GDP upward, but down forecast for Asia. Maybe this is because of China and India downward. It's the opposite side. So this is the question. So how come the GDP could increase quite a bit and your forecast is downward for the, of course we know about the conflict, Japan and Korea, United States and China. And the other, sorry, because this is about my country, Indonesia. So I don't know the page. Which one? Sorry.
Do you want to come back in a minute for a second question? Thank you.
Thank you very much for clarifying question. Actually, I have this figure of sub-regional growth forecast. So this is our overall forecast, updated this time. And for example, Vietnam, April, we set 6.8% growth rate, and this time we didn't change. Next year, 6.7%, this time we didn't change. But overall Southeast Asia, we downward revised, because other countries, we downward revised. And next year, also slightly downward revised, because other countries downward revised. So this is our overall 2-year horizon growth forecast, this year, next year, okay? So, but in addition to this, this is not a part of our baseline assumption and the forecast. What's the likely impact if trade conflict escalate? So this hypothetical assessment we perform separately. And this chart summarizes our main findings. Okay? And escalation scenario, as I said, U.S.-China bilateral trade fully escalated, covering all the goods bilaterally traded, plus the auto and auto parts imported by U.S. Encounter U.S. tariff measure. So that's a hypothetical situation. Although this plan was already put on the table, not yet fully materialized. So under this hypothetical setting, what's the likely impact through a 3-channel direct trade and production slowing down China, indirect slowing down through supply chain network, and then third element is a trade redirection. Chinese export slowing down, replaced by other Asian economies, export expansion to the U.S. market. So we did this hypothetical setting quantity assessment, likely impact using our granular ADB unique input-output table. This is a result, and as a result, according to our computation, Vietnam will gain, mainly because trade redirection effect from Chinese export to the U.S. Relocated to Vietnam export to the U.S. And according to our computation, Vietnam GDP keeping other catalyst values, keeping other things equal, suppose trade escalation fully escalated, then GDP will be increased 2.3% in Vietnam, spread over 2-3 years. So single year 1% or 0.8% GDP increase. Okay. Of course, other caveats I explained. I didn't consider impact of uncertainty through this escalation, and also policy response of each country we didn't consider. So this is simply comparing without trade measure GDP versus with fully escalated trade measure. So we compare these two pictures, still pictures, and then we found the difference is 2.31% of GDP for Vietnam. I hope, and this is outside of our baseline, forecast this year and next year. So I hope this is clear enough.
Okay. Yes, please, gentleman here.
Hi, I'm Kenji Kawase from Nikkei. One question, but two parts to it. Want to ask you about the other tensions in the region. You talked extensively about U.S.-China tension, like you did the simulation and stuff. Would you please talk about number one, about Japan-South Korea spat? And there are talks about more impact on South Korea, and there are some economists, private economists, talking about a possible recession in South Korea. However, the revision this time, even though you have downward revised South Korea's growth outlook, it's still far from being in a recession, I guess. I'm not quite sure, but would you please comment on South Korea with regard to the spat with Japan? That's my first part of my question number one.
Is it the first part, or is it effectively two questions?
Well, actually, okay, effectively two.
Okay, you come back then.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much for a very important question. Actually, Korea-Japan trade tensions are a big concern right now, and this is happening on top of this ongoing U.S.-China trade re-escalation of trade tension, and we see from latest days that we see a slowing down of bilateral trade. Overall trade is slowing down in last 1 year between Korea and Korea and Japan. Also, electronics and semiconductor trade also slowing down. Other side of this is a tourist visit from Korea to Japan, slowing down substantially. From Japan to Korea, according to the overall data, the impact seems to be much milder. I think I'm afraid it's too early to make any assessment what's the likely impact on Korean economy and Japanese economy, because it's just happening right now and situation is moving on. But as you mentioned, because seeing this slowing down of electronics and semiconductor trade, decline, there is a potential concern that may affect the high-end manufacturing industry on both ends. But I'd like to affirm this is very important to maintain more free trade and investment relationship, because Korea and Japan are number one beneficiary of post-World War II trade regime, and really export and investment play a key role for past 5 decades of economic miracle of Korea and Japan. So I think this is very important to reaffirm importance of maintaining and promoting more friendly, more freer economic relationship.
Is this downward revision of South Korea includes South Korea, Japan?
No. This time we downward revised Korean growth rate. Korean growth rate 2.5. April forecast revised down to 2.1%. We didn't include Korea-Japan trade tension, but overall, this electronics and semiconductor cycle actually affected the Korean economy more than other economies. So that's why we see this slowing down of Korean growth.
Walter.
Walter Sim from the Straits Times of Singapore. If I could follow up on the question from the Nikkei journalist earlier, if I may direct you to the third slide on growth prospects in developing Asia, could I direct your attention to the forecast of Japan, in which there was an upward revision? Now, I would think that the Korea-Japan spat wasn't factored into this, but given the US-China trade conflict, given the upcoming rise in consumption tax, could I get an understanding on your optimism for Japan? Thank you.
So actually, this upward revision of Japan is kind of a surprise for us as well. 0.8 growth, percent growth in April. We upward revised to 1.2% growth, and this is mainly because Q2 Japanese consumption is much stronger than our prior expectation. So that's why we upward revised. And what's the factors behind the consumption growth? It's a little bit difficult to say. There may be, seeing upcoming consumption tax increase, people may increase slightly their consumption. That may be one element. But having said this, we don't predict that the introduction of higher consumer tax won't lead to consumption slump, as we have seen last time, because government has been very careful to addressing this potential negative consequences of immediate negative consequences of consumption tax. Government has been very, very careful this time, so we don't see this happening in October and onwards. But having said this, this is an unexpected increase driven by consumption, stronger consumption, and maybe people's response to policy change.
So that is enough to offset the US-China trade, the uncertainties over US-China?
So actually, Japan, uncertainty, actually, it's a little difficult to say, but immediate, three elements: direct, indirect, and the trade redirection effects. Japan overall, similar to other Asian economies, overall impact on Japan is slightly positive, almost zero, but slightly positive. So actually, this is our assessment. And then separately, we see this unexpected supplies from Japan in Q2, and because of the strong consumption.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, please.
Sorry, the part two of my question is, again, from your revised projection, growth projection, this time on Hong Kong. You didn't really mention about Hong Kong in your speech. And this time you've downward revised the 2019 forecast to Hong Kong to 0.3%. And next year up, well, down to 1.5, but still up from 0.3. Okay, would you please elaborate on the basis of how you made this assumption, this new assumption on Hong Kong? And also, I was a reporter in Hong Kong for a long time. I thought this press conference was in Hong Kong for a long time. And was this like the first time that you moved over to Tokyo just because of all this trouble in Hong Kong? Thank you.
That's a good question. Actually, we decided to come to Tokyo way before. When we talk about, April, actually, we always, after I joined ADB in 2017, I always go to Hong Kong twice a year, ADO and ADO update, and for launching. But we thought maybe we can diversify our launching place, Singapore and other areas in Thailand, Bangkok, and Tokyo. But naturally, my preference is coming back to Tokyo, and in order to outreach Japanese audience as well. So this time we decided way before escalation of this political domestic turmoil. So it's also going to. The choice of venue this time is also going to what's happening right now in Hong Kong. But anyway, Hong Kong slowing down, downward revision, because U.S.-China trade tension, global economy slowing down, as well as, again, electronics and semiconductor cycle affecting Hong Kong a lot, because Hong Kong is really dependent on international trade. So that's why we mainly downward revised. And then on top of this political turmoil, it's it's still ongoing in Hong Kong. Overall, we downward revised. So this is the reason behind our big downward adjustment from 2.5% growth in April to 0.3% April. And then next year, we see slight bounce back because of the electronics and semiconductor cycle will be coming back. And also, we predict this political issue will be softened over the 1 year horizon.
Just one quick follow-up. So how much is the downward, when you break down the downward revision of 2019, how much is the political implication?
It's difficult to decompose. So I think I think political element is rather small, which I can say, but I don't think we can provide you with the exact decomposition of different elements. But mostly, majority of element downwards revision can be attributed to slowing down of global economy and semiconductor electronics cycle, as well as slowing down of as well as the U.S.-China trade tension.
Okay, yes, please. Your second question.
Sorry, sir. Just need your explanation about this Asian cities benefit from size agglomeration economics.
Yes.
Okay, yes. In Indonesia, the wage premium is minus. What do you mean of this minus graph here? And then below this graph, but also face hindrance in reaping these benefits. So what year is it, this data? You didn't mention the year of this data because I'm so surprised Jakarta is not so crowded. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For the first question, actually this is a little technical. We compare workers living in rural area versus orange bar, those workers living in the small cities. And slightly negative, but actually, statistically speaking, this is zero, meaning that same type of worker, same age, same gender, same education level, living in rural area versus living in smaller cities in Indonesia, they are getting basically the same wage. So in a sense, I think one possible interpretation is workers in small cities, I mean labor market of a small city in Indonesia and labor market rural areas seems to be very connected, and there are lots of probably short-term or medium-term labor mobility. So that's one possible interpretation. But literally, there is no wage gap between rural worker versus small city worker with the same characteristics and same qualification. So data for Google Map, I think we use this is the June 2019 Google Map data. And what we have done is early morning, I think 3 a.m. in the morning, 3 a.m. in the morning, this is off-peak hour. So point A to point B travel, how many minutes it has been taken. So 3 a.m., that's an off-peak hour, measure. And then peak time measure, it's 6 p.m. and also 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. we measure peak time traveling time. Okay, so the same pair, point A to point B, we measure using a Google Map, and then we systematically set A and B so that we can cover overall city area. By doing this, large-scale data collection and use of big data of travel time, we can make this congestion index. Probably Jakarta, because Jakarta now have rapid bus system, and Jakarta we see lots of improvement in public transportation. So as an overall, if we compare with other cities, Jakarta seems to be less crowded. But having said this, orange horizontal line this is the average of bigger cities in developing Asia, which has a 5 million or more population. So if we compare with average baseline, Jakarta, still we can see more congestion. So I think this is a systematic way we make assessment about congestion. Yeah. Of course, it's a matter of a comparison. Personally, I feel I used to stay in Bangladesh, Dhaka, 2 years. So I feel Dhaka traffic jam is the worst, and much worse than Manila. But according to this index, Manila is much worse than, slightly worse than Dhaka. I think this data is more reliable and well balanced because systematic use of Google Map covering larger scale of city areas. So I think this is response to your question.
Okay, we're basically out of time, but if anyone has an urgent final question, yes, please, last question.
Okay, it's not that urgent.
Go.
Hi, I'm Yuko Fukushima from NHK World. You mentioned rising private debt in developing Asia as one of the elements of downside risk. How bad is it? How much will it push down the overall GDP in developing Asia? Thank you.
So far, actually, debt is a very important issue. For corporates, having access to credit market, that's very important to implement potentially profitable and good project. So having access to credit is very important. And for household and individuals, having access to housing loan, that's very critical to making well-being better. So I think having debt per se is not necessarily a bad thing. So I don't think debt so far in Asia, accumulated debt is really dragging down economic growth. But what we are trying to say is that there is a potential concern. Although public debt GDP ratio has been under control, below 50%, but private debt GDP ratio is getting, in some countries, some cases, more than 100% and increasing trend. So I think if some external monetary shock or economic shock hitting this region, basically healthy debt becomes insolvency issues. So that's the risk, potential risk we are addressing. Yeah. And the government should watch and monitor the situation closely to contain these potential risks. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Sawada-san, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. We hope you will bring this event back to Tokyo, regardless of the situation in Hong Kong. We can guarantee you good public transport to get you here on time. And just to encourage you further, we would like to, as we always do with our speakers, to give you a year's honorary membership of the FCCJ. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.